In 1992, one man made $1 billion by breaking his own country's economy. You heard that right. While millions were losing jobs, pensions, and homes, he was quietly placing the biggest short bet of his life, not against a stock, against the British government itself. And here's the twist. The collapse didn't surprise him. He planned for it. So, how did he know exactly when the system would fall? The British pound can't fall. It's protected, backed by Europe. Totally safe. That's what they said. It wasn't just belief, it was doctrine. In boardrooms, they quoted it. On news desks, they echoed it. To question it was financial heresy. But one man didn't believe a word: George Soros. While the world saw a symbol of strength, he saw something else. Not a currency, a countdown. Because beneath the speeches and summit photos, the UK was standing on a fault line. They had joined the exchange rate mechanism, tying the pound to the German Deutsche Mark, a move sold as unity, stability, prestige. But it forced the pound into a foreign rhythm. Germany was exporting strength, Britain was importing problems. Inflation was high, manufacturing was shrinking, the housing market was cracking. Yet the pound had to remain artificially strong, not because the economy demanded it, but because the politicians did. It was like locking the thermostat in a burning building. The Bank of England's job was to defend the peg, raise interest rates, burn reserves, project calm. But Soros saw through the performance. He read the data, he tracked the flows, and more importantly, he understood the psychology. The government wasn't buying time, it was buying belief, and it was paying with taxpayer billions. So while officials gave speeches, Soros moved in silence. He borrowed, he shorted, he scaled. Billions aimed directly at the pound. Not out of hatred, not even out of greed, but because he knew how this kind of story ends. No economy can survive an artificial exchange rate forever, and no illusion survives a liquidity crisis. By late summer, the cracks were showing. Currency traders began circling. Central banks across Europe were tense. The British public had no idea. But Soros did. And he wasn't just betting the pound would fall, he was betting Britain wouldn't dare stop him. Inside the Treasury, officials began to panic. Emergency calls, quiet warnings, leaked memos. Interest rates were hiked, twice in a day. Still, the markets pressed harder. Every billion they spent defending the pound made Soros richer. The illusion was no longer fragile, it was broken. And the Bank of England? It was now playing a game it couldn't win, with rules it no longer controlled. Soros wasn't trading, he was cornering a government. And when a speculator corners a government, who blinks first? If you're still here, it means you don't just watch finance, you study the invisible moves behind it. So if you want to keep pulling the thread, uncovering what was never meant to be public, hit like and subscribe to Bull's Secrets. Because the next scene wasn't just a financial collapse. It was a shift in how global power is played. And in 24 hours, the whole world would feel it. At exactly 7:30 a.m. on September 16th, the British government made its first move. The pound had been under attack all night, but now the markets were awake, and London, the heart of global currency trading, was about to open. Inside the Bank of England, phones were lighting up. Traders were pulling capital. Funds were placing sell orders the size of small countries. There was no more room for delay. The Chancellor of the Exchequer issued the message: "We will defend the pound at all costs." Interest rates were raised to 10%. By 9 a.m., it wasn't working. The pound kept falling. So they raised rates again to 12%, Still falling. They pushed again, 15%. Markets shrugged. Soros wasn't flinching. His position was locked. His bet was placed, and now it was gaining momentum. Across the financial world, others began to follow his lead. Hedge funds, banks, private billionaires, all shorting the pound. It wasn't just a trade anymore. It was a coordinated run. Every time the government acted, the markets answered louder. Each move revealed the same truth. Britain was outnumbered. In one day, the UK burned through over £27 billion in foreign currency reserves trying to hold the line. That's not a typo. 27 billion. And yet, the pound kept sinking. At 11 a.m., a leaked memo reached the trading desks. The Bundesbank, Germany's central bank, would not step in to help. That was the final blow. Britain was alone. There were no more lifelines, no more allies, just a nation trying to hold up a currency the market had already rejected. By midday, panic was setting in. Not on the streets, not yet, but inside the institutions. British officials were trapped in a feedback loop. Every defense made them weaker. Every statement triggered more selling. By 1 p.m., the markets no longer believed anything the Bank of England said. Journalists began calling it a crisis. But insiders already knew this was a collapse. The pound was in free fall. What made it worse? No one could stop it, because the pressure wasn't coming from riots or revolts. It was coming from math, from coordinated capital, algorithmic trades, global liquidity flows, an invisible siege with no front line and no warning shot. That afternoon, Soros's position crossed a threshold. His profit estimate? Over $1 billion. But it wasn't the money that shook the world. It was what it meant. That a single speculator, acting with speed and precision, could overpower a sovereign currency, could force a government to its knees without firing a single shot. By 4 p.m., the decision came. The UK would withdraw from the exchange rate mechanism. The pound would float freely. It was over. The news spread instantly. The pound plummeted. The Bank of England was silent. Black Wednesday had just rewritten the rules of economic warfare. What was supposed to be a stable, European-backed, government-defended currency had collapsed in less than 12 hours, and the world was watching. The public was told it was just a market adjustment, that everything was under control. But behind the curtain, confidence had been shattered, not just in the pound, but in the idea that governments could control markets at all. And in every capital across Europe, a new question echoed. If Britain could fall this fast, who's next? On the surface, Britain moved on. The headlines faded. The Prime Minister gave reassurances. Markets stabilized at a new, lower reality. But beneath the surface, the consequences of Black Wednesday were still spreading. The pound had been broken, but what really shattered was credibility. For decades, the UK had positioned itself as a pillar of financial stability, a safe bet, a steady hand in European politics. But in a single afternoon, that image was erased. The message was clear. Britain could be defeated, not by war, not by policy, but by capital, moving faster than any government could react. And that wasn't just a British problem, because as the pound collapsed, other European economies began to panic. Italy, Spain, Portugal, Ireland. They were all tied to the same mechanism, all enforcing the same artificial pegs, all dealing with inflation, unemployment, and political pressure. What if they were next? In Frankfurt, The Bundesbank tightened communications. In Paris, ministers held emergency meetings behind closed doors. In Brussels, officials stopped smiling for the cameras. This wasn't just a currency event. It was a warning shot. And the man who fired it, George Soros, became a symbol. To some, a villain. To others, a genius. But to everyone, undeniable. He hadn't just made $1 billion. He had exposed something uncomfortable. That the global financial system wasn't built on certainty, but on confidence. And once confidence breaks, the rest follows fast. Inside the UK, the fallout turned political. The Chancellor of the Exchequer resigned. The government was humiliated, and the ruling party, once seen as economically competent, would lose power in the next election. But the most important damage wasn't to careers, it was to memory. From that day forward, every central banker in Europe remembered Black Wednesday. It changed how monetary policy was communicated, how capital controls were discussed, how future currency unions like the euro would be designed. The European Union quietly shifted strategy. No more soft pegs, no more half measures, either full integration or none. And at the center of this transformation was the ghost of a day no one wanted to talk about. But Soros wasn't haunted. He had played the game the way the system allowed, and he had won. Not by chance, not by luck, but by understanding something most leaders still ignored. That markets aren't loyal. They don't care about sovereignty, pride, or speeches. They care about pressure, leverage, flow. And if you can read those signs faster than the government, you don't just survive the storm, you become the storm. After Black Wednesday, the headlines moved on. Currencies recalibrated. Markets adjusted. Soros's name faded from the front pages. But something deeper had shifted. Something that couldn't be fixed with a press release or a new interest rate. Governments around the world began asking a question they had never dared to consider. What happens when one man can move an entire country? Not with tanks, not with protests, but with timing, information, and capital. Because what George Soros had revealed wasn't just a market inefficiency. It was a systemic blind spot. For decades, policymakers believed they could manage markets, set boundaries, build frameworks, control the narrative. But on September 16, 1992, that illusion cracked. It wasn't political. And through that crack, the real architecture of power became visible. It wasn't national, it was transnational. Fast, fluid, untraceable. A world where money moved at the speed of light and regulation crawled behind it. Soros didn't invent this system, he simply mastered it. While ministers clung to models built in the 1970s, he was running real-time simulations. While politicians gave speeches, he studied bond spreads, capital flows, and sentiment shifts hour by hour. And when he struck, there was no counter, because the system wasn't designed to resist someone like him. It was designed to believe no one like him existed. But here's the real twist. Soros wasn't alone. He was just the first to go that far. In the shadows, other funds took notes. Other billionaires started building faster models, more aggressive strategies, deeper positions. And quietly, a new class of actors emerged. Not governments, not corporations, but individuals, operating above both. Black Wednesday became a blueprint. How to weaponize liquidity, how to pressure central banks, how to create or destroy confidence. It was no longer about investing. It was about influencing the narrative before the trade was public. A single headline could move billions. A leaked memo could trigger a stampede. An ambiguous central bank statement could create a window just wide enough for those who knew how to read it. This is where the real game began. Not on trading floors, but in think tanks, private dinners, confidential briefings, and encrypted terminals scanning for weaknesses, not just in currencies, but in entire systems. After 1992, no central banker slept peacefully. They learned to fear the quiet players, the ones who didn't give interviews, the ones who didn't lobby, the ones who didn't need favors because they already had leverage. Soros showed what happens when financial intelligence outpaces institutional response. He made over $1 billion, but the true profit wasn't the cash. It was access. After Black Wednesday, he became more than a trader. He became a signal, a reminder that in the age of global capital, control is not about who governs, it's about who moves first. And sometimes, the most powerful decision in finance is not to play by the rules everyone else believes are unbreakable. It looked like a currency crisis, but it was something else. It was a message, written in billions, delivered in silence, and ignored by almost everyone in power. A single speculator, using the system's own rules, exposed its deepest weakness, that when confidence fades, everything else follows. Not just currencies, not just economies, but reputations, careers, elections, nations. And for a brief moment, the illusion broke. You weren't supposed to see it. But now that you have, what else might be hiding behind the headlines? What other stories ended in silence, not because they weren't true, but because they were too big to name? If this made you think deeper, look harder, question more, then you're exactly who this channel is for. So hit like and subscribe to Bull Secrets, because the next secret, it's already moving, and this time you'll see it before they do.